The sky over Red Hollow carried that heavy, late October weight, clouds pressing low, the kind that muted every sound and made even children's laughter seem subdued. It had been a typical Friday morning, full of chatter and excitement, as 14 kids from Red Hollow Middle School climbed aboard Bus 27 for a field trip to the State Museum in Cedar Rapids. No one could have predicted it would become the last time their families would see them. Detective Laura Spencer hadn't been in town long, 6 months maybe, and she still felt like an outsider. Red Hollow was one of those places where everyone seemed to know everyone, where her polished city habits and measured voice stood out. Yet here she was, standing in the school parking lot, watching tear-streaked parents plead for answers while local law enforcement scrambled, looking helpless against the magnitude of the unfolding nightmare. Sheriff Carter stood near the entrance, jaw set tight, his worn brown uniform straining against his broad frame. "We're doing everything we can," he told a cluster of parents. His voice was steady, but Laura could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "Everything you can?" a woman snapped, her voice breaking. Laura recognized her from a briefing. "Kelly Rhodes, mother of 12-year-old Jacob. My son has been gone for hours, and you're just standing here telling us you're doing everything you can. Where are they?" "Where's my baby?" Carter swallowed hard, but before he could answer, Laura stepped in. "Mrs. Rhodes," she said softly, her tone more calming than commanding. "I know you're scared. We all are. But we need to work together if we're going to find them. Please tell me anything you remember about this morning, anything at all." The woman blinked at her, trembling. He was so excited. He said he wanted to sit in the back of the bus with his friends. He packed his little camera. He wanted to take pictures of the dinosaur skeletons. Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Laura nodded, committing every word to memory. She needed to be more than an investigator here. She needed to be human. "Detective Spencer," Sheriff Carter called, motioning her aside. A few of the parents said they saw the bus leave at 8:15. Daniels was driving. "Mr. Daniels," Laura repeated, recalling his file. "Bus driver for 15 years, married, 2 kids, no disciplinary record." "And no one's heard from him?" Carter shook his head. "Cell goes straight to voicemail. No GPS ping. It's like they vanished into thin air." But Laura knew better. People didn't just vanish. As she walked toward the empty space where Bus 27 should have returned by now, she noticed the little things others might have overlooked. A loose button on the asphalt, a tiny pink hair tie near the curb, signs of kids being kids, but now ominous in their context. She crouched down, running her fingers over the damp concrete, feeling the chill of the morning air bite at her skin. "This wasn't random," she murmured to herself. The wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of burning leaves from nearby houses. It reminded her of Boston in the fall, of a time when she used to take her own daughter, Anna, on walks through tree-lined streets before— No, she couldn't let herself go there, not now. "Detective," a voice said behind her. It was Agent Morales, the FBI liaison flown in from Des Moines. He was taller than she expected, with a clipped tone that suggested he didn't like wasting time. "We need to set up a joint command. This isn't just a local matter anymore." "Do we have any leads?" Laura asked, standing to face him. "Not yet," Morales admitted. "But if this is what it looks like, we may be dealing with something bigger than a bus accident." Her stomach tightened. She already felt that in her bones. Around them, the chaos of Red Hollow played out. Reporters setting up tripods, deputies trying to corral distraught parents, children's friends whispering about what could have happened. Everyone wanted answers, but none came. As the sun began its slow descent behind the grey clouds, Laura knew one thing. This wasn't an accident. Something deliberate had happened to that bus, and whatever it wasn't over. If you're hooked by this chilling mystery, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. She turned back to Carter and Morales. "Then let's stop treating this like a traffic incident," she said, her voice sharper now. "We need to start treating it like a crime scene." No one disagreed. And in that moment, as Red Hollow braced itself for the truth, Laura silently vowed to bring those kids home, no matter what it cost her. By the next morning, Red Hollow was unrecognizable. News vans lined the main road like vultures, their satellite dishes pointed at the heavy grey sky. Camera crews roamed the sidewalks, shoving microphones into the faces of anyone who would speak. The tiny diner on Main Street had become a makeshift press hub, and the once quiet town now pulsed with a frantic, ugly energy. Detective Laura Spencer stood on the courthouse steps, scanning the crowd. The parents of the missing children were gathered inside, waiting for updates. Most had been awake all night, their eyes red from crying or glued to their phones in desperate hope for news. Some clung to one another, others sat stiff and alone, as if isolating themselves might keep them from unraveling completely. Sheriff Carter walked up beside her, his hat in his hands. "I don't like all these outsiders swarming in," he muttered, glaring at the rows of FBI agents and state police now stationed around town. "This is our community. They don't care about these families like we do." Laura didn't argue. He was right in a way, but she also knew Red Hollow was out of its depth. "We need their resources," she said. "And if this was premeditated, which I believe it was, we need every pair of eyes we can get." Before Carter could respond, Agent Morales approached, his phone in hand. "We've expanded the search perimeter," he said. "Every road, every back trail, even the old logging routes, still nothing. It's like the bus just drove off the face of the earth. Or someone made sure we couldn't find it," Laura countered. Morales looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "You sound awfully sure this was deliberate." "I am," Laura said. "Everything about this feels wrong. Buses break down, drivers get lost, but 14 kids and an experienced driver don't just disappear without a trace." Inside the courthouse, the tension was suffocating. Parents sat in metal folding chairs, flanked by grief counselors and volunteers passing out coffee. None of them would drink. Laura watched them closely, each reaction, each whispered conversation. Kelly Rhodes was pacing near the window, wringing her hands until her knuckles went white. Beside her, Mark and Susan Patterson, whose twins had been on the bus, stared at the floor in silence. Laura walked to the front of the room and raised her voice just enough to cut through the low hum of chatter. "I know how unbearable this is," she began. "But I promise you, we are doing everything possible to find your children. I need you to stay strong and to tell us anything you might remember about this morning, even if it seems small." A man in the back stood abruptly. It was Frank Miller, whose daughter Zoe had been on the trip. His voice was sharp, brittle. "Small? I've already told the sheriff everything. What are you actually doing?" "Talking won't bring them back. You people need to get off your asses and find them." Carter bristled, stepping forward. "Frank!" "No!" Frank snapped. "Don't Frank me. My little girl is out there God knows where, and you're just giving us speeches." Laura walked toward him, her expression calm but unwavering. "You're angry," she said. "You have every right to be. But I need you to use that anger to help me. You said Zoe was nervous about field trips. Did she mention anything else? Anyone who made her uncomfortable?" Frank's jaw tightened. "No," he said after a pause. "She was excited. Said Mr. Daniels promised to keep an eye on her. She liked him." Laura filed that away. Mr. Daniels. His name kept surfacing, not just as the driver, but as a trusted figure. Why would a man like that lead those kids to danger? Outside, the clouds thickened and a drizzle began to fall, slicking the streets. The air smelled of wet earth and gasoline as officers loaded search equipment into SUVs. Morales walked up behind Laura. "You're good with them," he said quietly. "They don't need me to be good," Laura replied. They need me to find their kids. A maintenance worker from the county road department approached then, nervously twisting his cap in his hands. "Detective," he said, eyes darting toward Carter. I think I saw the bus yesterday." Laura's pulse quickened. "Where?" "Not on the main road," he said. "It was on Old Mill Road. That doesn't lead to Cedar Rapids." "It leads nowhere." Laura and Morales exchanged a look. "A wrong turn, or something far more deliberate." "Show me," Laura said. And just like that, a fragile thread of hope began to form. Old Mill Road wasn't on any tourist map. It hadn't been maintained in years, and as Laura's SUV bumped along the cracked pavement, she could see why the county stopped using it. The road was swallowed by overgrown branches, the faded asphalt barely visible beneath dead leaves and mud. To the untrained eye, it would look abandoned. But the faint twin ruts in the dirt shoulder told another story. Something heavy had passed through here recently. "Bus tires," Laura murmured, crouching beside the tracks. The drizzle from earlier had turned to a steady, cold rain, softening the ground. These tracks were fresh. Agent Morales knelt beside her, examining the marks. "Could be anything," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Laura replied, tracing the grooves with her gloved hand. "This is wide, deep. That weight, that's no pickup or van." This was a bus. They followed the path until it veered toward an old logging route, the trees leaning over like watchful sentinels. A few hundred feet in, Laura spotted something bright against the mud, a pink backpack with a stitched unicorn patch, partially buried in the wet leaves. She lifted it carefully. "Belongs to Sophie Patterson," she said, recalling the list of the missing. She'd studied their faces so much that their names felt like her own memories. Morales exhaled. So, they were here, but why bring them down this road? "Or who brought them?" Laura corrected. Her mind raced. Mr. Daniels had driven this bus for 15 years. He knew every route, every safe road. He wouldn't have brought children here by mistake. Either he had been forced, or he was complicit. The rain drummed against her jacket as she scanned the tree line. "We need a search grid here," she said. "Dogs, drones, the works. If they left anything else behind, I want to find it." By afternoon, deputies, FBI agents, and volunteers combed the area. Laura stood near the tree line, her hands in her pockets, listening to the low murmur of radios and the occasional bark of a search dog. She'd been in this position before, waiting for a discovery that could either break a case wide open or gut it completely. It was Carter who approached first, holding a small, waterlogged notebook sealed in a plastic evidence bag. "Found this about 50 yards out," he said. Laura flipped it over. The cover had faded drawings of dinosaurs, childlike sketches in bright marker. Inside, the ink had bled, but she could make out lists. "Things I want to see today. Who sits where on the bus." A typical kid's journal. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. They'd been here, alive, long enough for Sophie to take this out of her backpack. Laura closed her eyes, feeling the edges of her own grief pressing in. Her daughter Anna used to keep a journal just like this. It had been pink with butterflies. She swallowed the thought before it could dig deeper. This wasn't about her. "Detective," Morales called from the edge of the grid. She joined him, and he pointed to a tire mark leading into the woods, sharper, deeper than the rest. "Looks like they stopped here, maybe turned around, or maybe another vehicle met them." Her stomach knotted. "If they transferred the kids here," Morales nodded grimly, "then we're dealing with more than one person." Later, at the temporary command center, a church basement converted into an operations hub, Laura briefed the gathered team. A whiteboard bore the children's names and photos, each one a reminder of what was at stake. "We found clear evidence the bus left the main route intentionally," she told them. "Backpack, notebook, tire marks. We also have reason to believe another vehicle may have been involved." Sheriff Carter slammed his fist against the table. I knew Daniels wasn't that kind of man. Someone forced him. Or someone had leverage, Morales added. We're digging into his finances, his family. If there's a connection, we'll find it. Laura spoke quietly, but with authority. Let's not rule out anything. We can't afford to. That night, unable to sleep, Laura sat in her motel room staring at the evidence. She'd worked hundreds of cases, but this one crawled under her skin differently, maybe because she could still hear the parents' voices breaking when they said their kids' names. Maybe because Anna's face kept flashing in her mind every time she saw Sophie Patterson's photo. The last page of Sophie's notebook stuck in her head. It had only one smeared line that she could read. Mr. Daniels said we're going somewhere different. It's a surprise. Laura stared at the words, heart hammering. If Daniels wrote that, what kind of surprise had he been planning? Or worse, who made him write it? It was just after dawn when the call came in. Laura's phone buzzed on the nightstand, waking her from the shallow, restless half-sleep she'd fallen into. She answered before the second ring. "Spencer," she said, voice hoarse. On the other end, Agent Morales didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We've got it," he said. "The bus." "It's been found." Laura sat up instantly. "Where?" "About 10 miles north of Old Mill Road, deep in the woods off an old logging trail, abandoned." Her pulse spiked. "Any kids? Daniels?" "Negative," Morales replied grimly. "Bus is empty, but you need to see this yourself." By the time Laura arrived, the sun had barely pushed through the dense canopy of trees. The air was damp and cold, the kind that clung to your clothes and made every breath feel heavy. The scene was swarming with law enforcement, yellow tape snaking between trees like a web. And there it was, Bus 27, tilted slightly in the mud. Its once bright yellow now dulled and streaked with grime. It looked wrong, out of place, like some carcass left to rot. Laura approached slowly, every step measured. Even from a distance, she could see the windows were smudged with streaks of tiny hands, trails of dirt where children had pressed their palms. The rear emergency exit hung slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. "Jesus," Carter muttered beside her, his hat clutched tightly in his hands. "Keep it together," Morales said. His tone was clipped, but Laura knew it wasn't arrogance. It was his way of holding the dread at bay. Laura stepped onto the bus, the floor groaning under her weight. The smell hit her first, a mix of mildew, sweat, and something metallic that made her stomach twist. Inside, the seats were empty, but not untouched. Crayon drawings, dinosaurs, stick figures, flowers had been smeared on the windows. Someone had scrawled something in large, jagged letters on the back of one seat. "Help." Near the driver's seat, Laura crouched and saw it, a small smear of dried blood on the edge of the aisle. Not much, but enough. "Get forensics in here," she called over her shoulder, but then something else caught her eye. On the third row from the back, carved deep into the vinyl of a seat, was a symbol, a circle intersected by two jagged lines, forming an almost star-like shape. Laura traced it with her gloved fingers. "You recognize this?" she asked Morales when he stepped inside. He shook his head. "Doesn't match anything I've seen. Gang sign, cult symbol, could be nothing." "It's not nothing," Laura said. "You don't carve something like this in a school bus seat by accident." Morales crouched beside her. "You think Daniels did this?" "Or someone wanted us to think he did." Outside, the press had already begun to gather, their shouts barely audible over the rustling trees. Carter stood near the barricade, visibly uncomfortable under their relentless questioning. "Do we release this to the public?" he asked when Laura joined him again. "No," she said sharply. "Not yet. If this was deliberate, if someone wanted this bus found, we need to know why, and broadcasting it could tip our hand." Carter nodded, though his jaw was clenched tight. "You ever seen anything like this?" he asked. Laura thought of her years in Boston, of all the dark, twisted cases that had haunted her since. "No," she admitted. "This feels different." She glanced back at the bus, its shadow long and eerie against the morning light. Something about it gnawed at her, how it had been left just far enough to be hidden, but not so far that they couldn't find it. This wasn't carelessness, it was placement. As the evidence team moved in, Laura kept staring at the carved symbol, replaying everything they knew. The wrong turn, the abandoned backpack, the note in Sophie's journal. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone wanted control of the narrative. And Laura couldn't shake the feeling that whoever they were still watching. She pulled Morales aside. "I want everything on Daniels," she said. "Financial records, phone logs, every person he's spoken to in the last 6 months, and find out if anyone in this county has ever reported seeing that symbol before." Morales nodded, already dialing his phone. As the team began cataloging the bus, Laura turned away from the scene, her eyes scanning the dense, endless trees. The kids weren't here. But somewhere out there, they were still waiting. And she swore to herself, silently and fiercely, she would not stop until she brought them home. Laura stared at the carved symbol's photograph pinned to the evidence board in the church basement. The makeshift command center buzzed with restless energy, phones ringing, officers conferring in hushed voices, the occasional outburst of frustration from a parent in the hallway demanding answers no one yet had. But her focus was locked on that symbol. She'd spent the night combing through databases with the FBI's analysts. Nothing. No gang markers, no known cult symbols, no connection to any organized group. It was like someone had invented it just for this. Morales entered, holding a folder thick with documents. "We dug deep on Daniels," he said, dropping it onto the table with a heavy thud. Debt up to his neck, a second mortgage on his house, credit cards maxed out. Looks like he was desperate for cash. Laura flipped through the pages, late notices, loan statements, letters from collection agencies. "Any indication of blackmail?" "Possibly," Morales replied, "but it gets worse. His wife filed for separation 2 months ago. He'd been living in a rental apartment, alone. Vulnerable." Laura tapped the photograph of Daniels on the board, a man in his mid-40s with soft eyes, the kind of man parents trusted to drive their children safely. "If someone wanted a pawn, he'd be an easy target," she said. Morales crossed his arms. Or maybe he wasn't a pawn. Maybe he saw a way out of his mess. "You saw the note in the kid's journal." "Mister." Daniel said, "We're going somewhere different." Maybe he took that bus exactly where he wanted it to go. Laura bristled. That's one possibility, but the blood on the bus, the help scrawled on the seat. If Daniels was in control, why leave that? "Maybe he lost control," Morales countered. She didn't answer. Her instincts told her this wasn't just about one man making a bad choice. There was a bigger hand guiding this. Sheriff Carter entered then, his face red and tight. "Parents are tearing me apart out there," he growled. "They want answers now. What the hell am I supposed to tell them?" Laura turned to him. "Tell them we're following real leads. We're not guessing anymore. We're getting closer." "Closer," Carter barked. "We found an empty bus and a creepy carving." "That's it." Laura didn't flinch. "It's not just a carving, it's communication. Whoever did this wanted us to see it. They're telling us this isn't random." Carter threw up his hands and stormed out, muttering under his breath. When he was gone, Morales leaned against the table. "You really think this symbol means something?" "I know it does," Laura said. "I've seen this before, people leaving marks when they want credit for their crimes. It's about power." Before Morales could respond, a deputy rushed in with a printout. "You'll want to see this," he said. It was grainy security footage from a gas station 2 towns over, time-stamped the morning of the disappearance. The camera captured Bus 27 slowing at an intersection before turning off the main highway. The driver's face wasn't visible, but the decision was deliberate. "They went off-route," Morales said, pointing. "Not lost, not forced, deliberate." Laura leaned closer. "Look, there." A dark SUV followed the bus, keeping a steady distance. Morales exhaled sharply. "That's our second vehicle." Her stomach turned. This wasn't just Daniels. This was coordinated. The room went quiet as the implications sank in. Later that evening, Laura sat in her car outside the Pattersons' house, staring at the warm glow of the porch light. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get too close to the families, but that promise was already breaking. She couldn't stop seeing Sophie's unicorn backpack in the mud or the scrawled word "help" on that bus seat. Her phone buzzed. It was Morales. "Got a hit," he said. "That symbol? It's obscure, but one of our analysts found a match in an old file. An emblem used by a defunct religious commune in Iowa. Most members disbanded or disappeared in the late 90s, but a few still unaccounted for." Laura's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Send me everything. Names, photos, locations." "You really think this is tied to them?" Morales asked. "I don't think," she said. "I know." As she hung up, the weight of the revelation sank in. This wasn't just an abduction, it was a message, and Laura needed to figure out who it was meant for before it was too late. The town hall smelled like stale coffee and fear. The folding chairs scraped against the hardwood floor as parents packed into the room, their voices a low roar of anger and grief. Laura stood near the front, flanked by Sheriff Carter and Agent Morales, trying to look composed, while the weight of their stares bore down on her. "Why are we still sitting here?" Frank Miller barked from the middle of the room, his face flushed with fury. "My daughter has been gone for days. Days! What are you people even doing?" Before Laura could answer, Susan Patterson shot up from her seat, her hair wild, her hands trembling. "Don't you dare act like you care more than the rest of us, Frank. We're all losing our minds. And every day that passes, my twins—" Her voice broke, and she sank back down, sobbing. The room erupted, parents yelling over one another, accusing the school, the sheriff's department, even each other. Some believed the children were dead and wanted to begin mourning. Others clung desperately to hope, refusing to accept that possibility. Laura raised her hands. "Please," she said firmly, though her voice softened at the edges. "I know you're scared. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But fighting each other isn't going to bring them home." "Then what will?" Kelly Rhodes snapped. Her grief hardened into sharpness. "Because all I see are meetings and press conferences, while our kids are out there with God knows who." "We are following solid leads," Laura said, meeting her gaze. "We found the bus. We're analyzing new evidence. And I promise you, every resource we have is being used to bring them back." A murmur rippled through the room. Some parents looked mollified, others remained unconvinced. "Then why aren't you telling us everything?" Frank pressed. "What aren't you saying? Because I know when I'm being handled, Detective." Laura felt Morales' eyes on her, silently warning her not to give too much away. But she also knew the truth. If these parents lost faith in her, she'd lose the fragile control she had over this situation. "There are details we can't release yet," she admitted. "Because if we do, we risk tipping off whoever did this. I need you to trust me when I say we are closer than you think." It wasn't enough, but it was all she could give. The meeting dissolved into smaller arguments and hushed conversations. Some parents clustered together, trading theories. Others stormed out, their hope wearing thin. When the room cleared, Morales approached her. "You're walking a tightrope," he said. "Do I have a choice?" Laura replied, exhaustion seeping into her voice. They need someone to believe in, and right now, that's me. Even if you don't believe it yourself, he asked. Laura didn't answer. Later, back at the command center, she reviewed the latest development, a ransom note that had arrived at the sheriff's office. It was typed, no fingerprints, no DNA. The message was chilling in its simplicity. They are safe. Pay and you get them back. No police. No tricks. The amount demanded was obscene. $2 million. Carter slammed the paper onto the table. This is it. Proof of life. We need to pay them. Morales shook his head. Or it's a fake. Could be an opportunist trying to exploit the chaos. We've seen it before. Laura stared at the note, her instincts warring. If this is real, they'll make contact again. If it's fake, they'll disappear when they don't get what they want. So we do nothing, Carter snapped. We do what we always do, Laura said. We verify. Quietly. No leaks. No promises. That night, Laura sat alone at her motel desk, the ransom note under a pool of yellow lamplight. Her hands trembled as she thought of the kids, frightened, cold, maybe hurt. She remembered Anna's voice, small and sweet, asking if she could stay up late to watch one more cartoon. She closed her eyes, forcing the memory back into its box. This case wasn't about her. It couldn't be. And yet, she couldn't ignore the thought that kept creeping in. If she failed these kids, she'd be failing Anna all over again. The call came just before dawn, jarring Laura from another night of shallow, restless sleep. Morales' voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. They found someone. A girl. She's alive. Laura was already on her feet. Where? Near the old quarry off Route 12. Sheriff's deputies picked her up, wandering alone. She's in shock. By the time Laura arrived, the quarry was a hive of activity. Red and blue lights strobed against the jagged rock walls, painting everything in harsh colors. Deputies milled around, some keeping curious locals back, others conferring near a blanket-wrapped figure sitting on the back of an ambulance. Laura's chest tightened when she saw her, a small, pale girl with matted hair and hollow eyes staring blankly at the ground. "Emily?" Laura asked softly, approaching with care. The girl flinched at the sound of her name. She couldn't have been older than 14. Her lips were chapped, her face smudged with dirt, and her clothes, once a bright hoodie and jeans, were torn and stained. A paramedic crouched beside her. She's dehydrated, hypothermic, and probably malnourished, but no major injuries. Laura crouched too, keeping her tone low and gentle. "Emily, my name's Laura. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what happened?" The girl's eyes darted toward her, then away. Her voice, when it came, was little more than a whisper. They had masks, all black. They said, "Don't scream." Laura's heart clenched. "Do you know where the others are?" Emily's head moved in a slow, trembling shake. "Tunnels," she murmured. "Dark, underground. We were underground." "Tunnels?" Morales had appeared beside them, his expression tense. Emily hugged her knees tighter. "Mr. Daniels. He tried to stop them. They hurt him." The words hit Laura like a punch. Daniels, hurt, maybe dead, trying to protect the children. It didn't fit the narrative of a willing accomplice. "Emily, can you tell us how you got out?" Laura asked. The girl blinked slowly, as if struggling to pull the memory from a fog. "Door, small door, when they weren't looking." Her voice cracked. "I just ran." Laura glanced at Morales. "We need to get her to the hospital. And a trauma specialist. She's been through hell." Emily grabbed Laura's sleeve before she could stand. "Don't. Let them take me back," she whispered, her voice breaking. Laura met her terrified gaze. "No one is taking you back. You're safe now, I promise." As deputies secured the scene, Morales pulled Laura aside. If what she's saying is true, this changes everything. Underground tunnels? This isn't some improvised operation. This is infrastructure, planning. We're talking about an organized group. Laura nodded grimly. And Daniels, if he really fought back, then we've been chasing the wrong lead. He wasn't our villain. He was a victim. At the command center, the atmosphere shifted from despair to grim determination. Maps of the surrounding area were unrolled across tables, markers circling every known abandoned mine, sewer line, and storm drain. Sheriff Carter paced like a caged animal. We're talking about miles of ground to cover. We can't just start digging. We don't dig, Laura said. We narrow it down. Emily escaped near the quarry. That's our radius. There's a network of old Prohibition-era tunnels out here, most of them mapped, some not. That's where we start. Parents gathered in the hall as news of Emily's survival spread. Some clung to it like a lifeline. Others grew angrier, demanding to know why their kids hadn't been found too. Mark Patterson grabbed Laura's arm as she passed. "You brought one back," he said, his voice trembling. "Please, bring the rest, please." Laura didn't answer because words felt like lies. All she could do was keep moving. That night, alone in her motel room, Laura replayed Emily's broken words. Tunnels. Masks. Daniels tried to stop them. She spread out the maps across her bed, tracing her finger along the quarry's perimeter. Somewhere under all that rock and dirt, the others were waiting. And for the first time in days, she felt something she hadn't let herself feel before: hope. By the next morning, the quarry had become the center of the investigation. Search dogs were brought in, drones scanned the tree line, and agents with ground-penetrating radar probed for any sign of the tunnels Emily had described. Every beep of equipment and shout from a deputy felt like it might lead to a breakthrough, but hours passed with no discoveries. Laura stood by one of the command tents, coffee in hand, staring at a map of the area. Circles and arrows covered it. Mine entrances, collapsed shafts, storm drains. She kept running Emily's words in her mind. Tunnels, small door, masks. "We've been over every accessible tunnel within 3 miles, Morales said, joining her. His tone was sharp, his patience fraying. If they're still underground, they're either in a place we don't know exists, or they've moved. "They're still here," Laura said quietly, almost to herself. "You don't build something like this just to abandon it. This place matters to them." Morales tilted his head. "You sound certain." She turned to face him. "You saw that symbol on the bus. They wanted us to find it. They wanted us to know this wasn't random. They're not running. They're sending a message." Before he could respond, a deputy approached, holding a dusty manila folder. "Detective Spencer found this in county archives." Laura opened it, scanning the yellow documents. Old police reports, some dating back decades. Her breath caught. "Children went missing from this area before," she said, flipping through the pages. 3 cases in the 90s, unsolved, all kids. "Wait," Morales said, leaning closer. "The same quarry? Within a 10-mile radius?" Sheriff Carter had walked up in time to hear. His face paled. "Those were written off as runaways," he muttered. Laura's eyes narrowed. "You wrote them off!" Carter stiffened. "Don't you start. This was before my time as sheriff." "But you were a deputy then," she pressed, "and you didn't think 3 missing kids near the same place in a 2-year span deserved more?" Carter's jaw clenched. "You don't know what this town was like back then. We didn't have the resources. And the parents—" He trailed off, his voice low. "The parents gave up." Laura bit back her anger. This wasn't the time to bury him under guilt. Not yet. But she filed it away. The negligence wasn't just a footnote. It was part of the pattern. Later that afternoon, Morales returned with an update from the FBI's analysts. "That commune I told you about? The one tied to the symbol?" They called themselves the Children of the Star, a fringe religious group that believed in cleansing corruption by reclaiming the innocent. They disbanded, or at least disappeared, 20 years ago. But a few of their members were never tracked down. Laura studied the faded photographs he laid on the table, men and women in simple clothes, their faces serene and unreadable. She felt a chill crawl down her spine. Could they still be operating out here, she asked. Maybe, Morales said, or someone's resurrected their beliefs. Either way, we're dealing with people who know this land better than we do. People who've been planning for a long time. As darkness fell, the search intensified. Flashlights cut through the forest like narrow beams of hope. Deputies shouted coordinates over radios, and forensics crews catalogued every scrap of evidence, no matter how small. Laura walked alone for a moment, letting the night swallow her. The smell of damp earth, the distant hum of generators, the eerie quiet of the woods, it all pressed down on her. She couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. When she returned to the tent, Morales was waiting with a look that said he'd been holding back bad news. "What now?" she asked. He handed her a photograph. It was of one of the commune members, a gaunt man with piercing eyes. "Name's John Kessler. One of the unaccounted-for leaders. We ran his face through every database. Guess what? He's been using an alias, living 15 miles from here. Quietly, under our noses." Laura felt her pulse quicken. "Then we bring him in." Morales nodded, already assembling a team. As she prepared for the operation, Laura knew this wasn't the end. It was just the next layer of a web stretching back decades. And now, finally, she had a thread to pull. The air inside the tunnel was suffocating. Damp, stale and heavy, with the kind of silence that made every sound echo longer than it should. Laura crouched as she moved, the beam of her flashlight slicing through the darkness, revealing jagged stone walls and wooden supports rotting with age. They had found it at last, a concealed entrance at the base of the quarry wall, hidden behind a collapsed section of brush and debris. Emily's fragmented memory had led them here, and ground-penetrating radar confirmed there was a network of chambers below. It wasn't just a tunnel. It was an underground complex. Morales' voice crackled in her earpiece. "Keep your head low. We don't know how deep this goes." "I know," Laura whispered back, her voice bouncing off the narrow walls. Behind them, a team of agents moved cautiously, their weapons raised. Sheriff Carter trailed at the rear, grim-faced and silent, a man who had finally realized just how badly this case had slipped through his fingers. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Water dripped somewhere far ahead, and the smell of mildew was replaced by something sharper. Burned wood, maybe incense. "This is old," Morales muttered, scanning the crude wooden beams that reinforced the ceiling. "This place was built decades ago." Laura's flashlight swept across the wall and froze. Carved into the stone was the same symbol from the bus, circle and intersecting lines, only here it was larger, etched with care, as if it marked something sacred. "They lived here," she said quietly. "Not just hiding, living." The tunnel widened into a chamber, and Laura's stomach twisted at what she saw. Cots lined the walls, small, thin mattresses with blankets that looked recently used. Wooden crates were stacked in the corners, filled with canned food, water jugs, and other supplies. But what chilled her most were the personal touches. Crude drawings on the walls, toys scattered on the floor, tiny shoes placed neatly beside a cot. "Jesus Christ," Carter muttered, running a hand over his face. "They had the kids here," Laura said, her throat tight. "They were keeping them alive." A noise, faint but real, made them all freeze. "Did you hear that?" one of the agents whispered. Laura raised her hand for silence. The sound came again, a muffled whimper. She followed it, moving toward a heavy wooden door at the far end of the chamber. It was reinforced with iron bolts, and a large padlock hung loosely from the latch. "Someone get this open," she ordered. A bolt cutter snapped the lock, and the door creaked as it swung inward. The smell hit first, stale sweat, fear, and something metallic. Then her flashlight caught them. Children. 13 of them, huddled together in a corner of the room, their faces pale and gaunt, but unmistakably alive. Their eyes flinched at the sudden light, some shielding their faces, others staring with hollow, uncomprehending expressions. "Oh my God," Carter breathed. Laura stepped forward, kneeling to meet their gaze. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now. We're here to take you home." One of the boys, no older than 12, stepped forward cautiously. "Mr. Daniels," he whispered. "They hurt him." Laura's chest tightened. "Where is he now?" The boy pointed toward a smaller adjoining room. She braced herself before entering. Daniels lay on the floor, motionless. His shirt was soaked with dried blood, his face pale. A quick glance told her everything. Whatever he had done, fighting back, protecting the kids, it had cost him his life. For a moment, Laura just stood there, the weight of his sacrifice pressing down like a stone. She crouched, closing his eyes with a gloved hand. "You did good," she whispered, voice breaking. Morales stepped in behind her. "We need to move. Whoever did this could still be nearby." She nodded, wiping her eyes before turning back to the children. "Listen to me," she said, her voice steady now. "We're getting you out. Right now." As agents began ushering the kids toward the tunnel entrance, Laura glanced once more at the carved symbols on the walls. This place wasn't just a hideout. It was a temple, and whoever built it wasn't finished. The night air hit like a shock as they emerged from the tunnel, the children blinking under the harsh glow of floodlights set up by the response teams. Medics rushed in, wrapping them in blankets, checking their vitals, reassuring them in soft voices. Some of the kids clung to the agents who had carried them out, refusing to let go, their small fingers digging into uniforms like lifelines. Laura stood near the exit, heart pounding, watching them go one by one. Relief washed over her in waves, but it was jagged, incomplete. 13 rescued, one still unaccounted for, Sophie Patterson. Her mind wouldn't let her forget the unicorn backpack, the drawings in the notebook. Sophie wasn't among the survivors. Morales approached, his expression grim. "We're still sweeping the lower tunnels. It's possible she was moved before we got here." "Or worse," Laura said quietly. He didn't argue. Sheriff Carter walked up, his face pale and ashen. "I called the parents. They're on their way." "God help us when they see the empty spot," Laura glanced at him. "We're not done. We'll find her." But deep down, she knew it was a promise she couldn't make. As medics loaded the children into ambulances, an agent handed Morales a folder. "You'll want to see this," he said. Inside were photographs taken from a hidden room, deeper in the tunnels. Walls plastered with pages of scripture, crude drawings of the symbol, and Polaroids of the children. Some of the images dated back weeks, others years. "They've been doing this for a long time," Morales said, his voice low. Laura felt the bile rise in her throat. "This isn't an abduction ring," she said. "This is a belief system. They weren't just taking kids, they were indoctrinating them." The Polaroids confirmed it. Notes scrawled on the backs with phrases like "chosen and purified." A cold shiver ran down her spine. "They weren't hiding from us," she said. "They believed they were untouchable." An agent ran up, panting. "We've got movement. West Tunnel." "2 suspects fleeing." Laura grabbed her flashlight and weapon without hesitation. "Take me there." They found them half a mile out. 2 figures dressed in black, sprinting through the woods. A brief chase ended with agents tackling them to the ground. When Laura saw their faces, she froze. John Kessler, the gaunt-eyed leader from the commune photographs. He stared at her with unnerving calm, even as agents cuffed him. "You're too late," he said softly, almost like a prayer. "Where's Sophie Patterson?" Laura demanded. He just smiled, blood staining his teeth. "She's been chosen. She's beyond your reach now." Her hand tightened around her weapon, fury boiling up inside her, but she forced herself to step back. "Take him to holding," she ordered, her voice like ice. Back at the command center, the children were reunited with their families, the air filled with cries, some joyful, some guttural with grief. Laura stayed at the edge of the room, watching as parents fell to their knees, clutching their kids like they would never let go. But Mark and Susan Patterson stood apart, their faces hollow. Their twins had been saved, but Sophie's absence was a wound too deep to mask. Laura approached quietly. "We're still looking for her," she said. Susan nodded weakly, tears streaming silently down her face. "Just bring her home." Laura wanted to say she would. She wanted to say she'd burn every inch of Red Hollow to find Sophie, but she couldn't. So instead, she said, "I won't stop." Hours later, as the chaos quieted and the children were transported to hospitals for care, Laura stood alone by the bus, the same bus that had started it all. Its shadow loomed in the early dawn, and she felt the enormity of what they'd uncovered pressing in on her. This wasn't over. Kessler was in custody, but others were out there. The cult hadn't died. It had simply gone underground. Laura closed her eyes and drew a long breath. She'd brought 13 children back, but there was still one missing. And that meant her work wasn't done. As she walked back toward the flashing lights and waiting families, she made herself a promise. She would not stop, not until Sophie Patterson and every child like her was found. If this story gripped you, subscribe and click the video on your screen for more stories you won't forget.